Gris is a 2D puzzle platformer that is the first game by the Spanish developer Nomada Studio. Longtime friends Adrian Cuevas, who worked on for example Far Cry 3 as a programmer, and Roger Mendoza, who for example has worked as a programmer for Assassin's Creed games, teamed up with the artist Conrad Rosette, who had the itch to bring his art into video games for the first time. And so, Gris came to be. While there isn't all that much to spoil about Gris' story, I would like to mention that I will be showing clips from all parts of the game in this video. Why I'm mentioning this is because I feel that uncovering some of these gorgeous areas and scenes in the game is probably the most impactful thing about the experience here. So some players might have their initial reaction to these moments lessened by seeing them first on a video like this, before playing the game. I will be sharing my interpretation of Gris' story and themes in the tail end of this video, so if you only care about that sort of spoilers, I will give a separate spoiler warning for that later on. Let's talk about the most obvious thing about the game first. Gris is incredibly gorgeous to look at. This might sound like a cliché, but it truly looks like a painting that has come to life before your eyes. The rich use of color amplifies the uniqueness of all the different areas of the game, but even when this game has been filled up with color, it never overdoes it, and there's this very specific, almost melancholic atmosphere planted in the game world at times. I get the same feeling from other works I've seen from the artist Conrad Rosette, seamless combinations of beauty and sorrow. Multiple times I was just sitting there with my mouth open, just completely hypnotized by what I was seeing on the screen. It's really that beautiful. When it comes to the visuals of video games in general, I often find myself most impressed by gorgeous games that don't aim for realism with their graphics. Not that I wouldn't appreciate the effort that goes into that sort of games as well, but it's just so wonderful to see a game with so strong art style like this that makes me realize you cannot do this any better. This is it. This is this certain art style perfected. Gris is one of those games, and it will look gorgeous forever. I also like how they went for the limited animation direction that makes the animations of some elements in the game have limited frame rate, emphasizing the key frames of the animations, while the game itself will play in perfectly smooth frame rate, making it look more like an animated movie. I'm a big fan of this visual technique, and you can see this used in multiple games like Hollow Knight, Cuphead and Guilty Gear for example. I also like how much the camera zooms in and out to create a different impact, sometimes to show off these huge structures around our player character, making her look really tiny and giving a more grander view for the player of the surrounding world design, and sometimes zooming really close to the player character to highlight the more finer details of the artwork. You even occasionally meet some cute creature designs in this world. That's a condom. There are a couple of nitpicks about the visuals that I want to mention though. There were some times in the game where certain interactable things didn't pop up quite enough from the background. While this decision might have been made to keep the art style more consistent, it slightly suffers in a gameplay sense, when it's at times a bit hard to see what is interactable on the screen or what is on the background or the foreground of the image. Another thing that probably will not end up bothering too many people was that I swear this is a commonly known stock smoke effect that is used during the Desert Storm section in the game, and it just sticked out for me. The game's visuals and atmosphere are greatly supported by the beautiful soundtrack composed by Berlinist, and is always setting the right tone for what is happening on the screen. The sound effects are also spot on, of which my favorites are the sound of footsteps Gris makes when walking on certain platforms, and the singing Gris does when she at one point regains her voice, which could easily get annoying since it's used multiple times for some puzzles in the late game, but somehow it just keeps sounding beautiful and fitting. I also like how the soundscape muffles when you enter underwater. So, aesthetically, Gris is a masterfully done work of art. But how does it fare on the gameplay side of things? The controls of the game are very simple. You have a button for jumping, an interaction button, and later on a separate button for singing that is used for certain puzzles. At first, what I thought I was going to get with Gris was just a gorgeous walking simulator, since the pace of the game was so incredibly patient and the controls were simple. But then, Gris started to open up gameplay-wise. However, do not go into this game hoping for epic combat sections, boss battles, or anything like that. This is a puzzle game with some platforming. More areas you go through in the game, the more you unlock special abilities for Gris that will change the puzzles and problem-solving sections that the game will present to you. You will gain the ability to turn yourself into a block that will prevent you from being affected by strong winds and lets you crash through some fragile objects. You learn to float in the air in order to make the longer jumps, and so on. There is occasionally some weight in the movement, but overall the platforming in the game feels good, and the puzzles, while some of them simple and seen before one too many times in other games, offered really nice variety of problem-solving sections and had some clever original ideas too. One of the puzzles was actually created in a way that it was way smarter than I thought it was after I solved it, so when I was about to give some criticism to it, my expectations were actually pleasantly exceeded. The game world of Gris is built in an interesting way. While I was playing through it the first time, I felt like I was constantly missing something or lost, but somehow always found my way without getting stuck. It was a strange feeling I've not felt in ages, and it's hard for me to put my finger on what exactly about the world design made me feel like this, but it did. And I liked it. There was one weird decision made with one shortcut in the game that doesn't really make any sense, but other than that, the level design is great. Two things I want to mention that do not bother me all that much, but might bother some players out there, are the lack of fail state in the game and the length of it. Now, as far as I know, you cannot die in Gris, but most of the time this doesn't end up mattering. This is a puzzle platformer game without combat, so only thing you can really lose here is time while you try to solve the given problem at hand. And that didn't bother me a bit, except for maybe during one section in the game. There's this one part where you get chased by a giant eel that tries to eat you. If there would be some sort of penalty for failing here, it would make the encounter more suspenseful. Well, to be specific, you can fail an achievement if you mess up here, but that's it. It's still a great scene to look at, but since our player character is protected by a so-called plot armor, it's hard to feel any sense of real threat here. When it comes to the length of the game, Gris is about 3 to 4 hours long experience. If you have been following me for a while, you probably know what my stance is on video game length, and that is quality over quantity. Some of my favorite games are extremely short but also extremely refined experiences, best completed within one sitting, where you can basically devour most of what the game has to offer in one go. Now, I know not all people share this point of view when it comes to game length, and I get that, but Gris packs a lot in that 4-hour duration time. Variety of puzzles, gorgeous visuals and music with an interesting game world that provides both relaxed platforming as well as some action-packed moments with a subtle but touching overarching story. Yes, there could be more game here at times, but then again, I'm not sure how well any more complex gameplay mechanics would have fit to the experience Nomada wanted to create here. I think they achieved everything they wanted to achieve very well, and I was not even once broken out of the immersion once the game's atmosphere sucked me in. To me, Gris came out at the perfect time. I was feeling a bit of a platforming craze and was playing some other titles with my friends. But since all these were more action-oriented games, Gris provided a very nice relaxing balance to that, and that might have been one of the reasons why I liked my time with the game so much. I'm sure some people are going to find the game too easy, since even at its hardest I cannot call it all that challenging, but if you are a completionist, Gris has also hidden areas and collectibles that might better justify a second playthrough and extend the time you spent with the game. This would be the time where I touch on the story of Gris a bit, so if you're afraid of spoilers, this is your time to leave. The game starts out with our player character, a girl named Gris, losing her voice and entering the strange dreamlike world the game takes place in. This world is at first completely drained out of color and detail, but while Gris progresses through the world, she brings back the color and life into it. The dark creatures that try to harm you are chaotic, wild and colorless, while everything else in the game world has this strange, consistent symmetry to it. Perhaps for a reason, Gris herself looks like something from between, since the game is about her trying to get through a personal loss and bring back color to her life. This actually happens quite literally in the game. Each of the areas in the game have very distinct color pattern that in the start of each level bleeds into the environment. And from the achievements you unlock in the game, we learn that this journey of Gris also symbolizes different stages of grief. During her journey, Gris sees different manifestations of this female character, often in form of statues that are either crying or holding Gris. In the end of the game, we see Gris getting consumed by darkness, but ultimately bursting out of it and bring all color back to the world and ascend into heavens. How I first interpreted the game's story was that the statues we see represent Gris herself, and the game is her struggle to accept herself in the end and ascend as a human to a better tomorrow after depression. Or even if you want to think it in a more sinister way, surviving the limbo after suicide and ascend into heavens. That was until I unlocked a secret cutscene in the game. There are these collectibles scattered around the game world called mementos. If you collect all of them and enter this hidden room and sing in there, a following cutscene will play. The woman you see throughout the game seems to be Gris's mother, so the depression Gris was going through was about losing her mother and combating the feel that most of us get after losing someone. Will you remember all the good things and good moments you spent with a person, or will you get consumed by grief and are only able to focus on the thought that this person is now gone? I bet the story was left intentionally vague so that players can find more personal experiences and different interpretations from it. The gameplay of Gris can be too simplistic for some players at times, and some might not be happy about the length of the game at full price. But if you're looking for a gorgeous experience that takes you somewhere else for a couple of hours, I suggest giving Gris a chance. Thank you for watching, and take care.